let's be honest, very few of us, and this is including me, watch anime and have absolutely no questions. The sign of good media is you watch it and you wonder about what the greater consequences of some of the actions you're watching take place on the screen mean for the universe as a whole. Now, a perfect anime will understand the questions that a viewer will have and try to address them in a timely fashion. One Piece does an incredible job of this, while other anime will leave a wake of questions that people feel as though never got answered. But here's the thing, even though shows like One Piece do an incredible job of answering said questions, a lot of people miss the answers. And this is no exception for Naruto. In fact, I would say Naruto is a sterling example of a show where people have questions that got answered by the source material, but people missed. But there's also a lot of questions in Naruto that didn't get answered in things like the manga or the anime and actually got answered in interviews or light novels or just on social media forums and AMAs. And I have a list of questions from Naruto that people feel as though haven't got answered. Things like, why didn't Jiraiya come back? Why didn't Shisui come back? Why didn't Sakura get a power-up? Why didn't Neji and Lee show up more in Shippuden? Why didn't Deidara use C0 as a reanimation? Why didn't somebody use Reaper Death Seal on Kaguya or Madara? Why didn't Itachi get revenge for Shisui? Why didn't Kakashi go blind during the war arc? And why did he get so much more chakra? You see, these are the kinds of questions I get day in and day out, and I answer these questions day in and day out. But I've never really seen anybody make a video answering some of Naruto's most common questions. And this is far from a complete list of unanswered questions in Naruto, and I want you guys to put your unanswered questions in the comments to this video so I can make future parts to this video. For the moment, we're gonna go with the questions that I just read off. But before we get into that, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And while you guys are clicking away, go ahead and follow my 3 other YouTube pages. The first and most important of which is the Weeb Commander, where instead of talking Naruto, I talk all other anime. If you got unanswered questions for any other anime, you can ask me over on that page over there, and I'll get to it eventually. My other 2 are NCGamer23, where instead of talking anime, I play video games, and Hammer Collection, where instead of talking anime while sitting in this chair, I talk it while I build those big old statues behind me. So questions, we all got them. I still have some that have never been answered. But today I have a list of very important, very pressing questions that you guys have about the show that, well, I know everything about. So without further ado, let's jump into our first question. Why didn't Jiraiya come back as a reanimation? While we technically have an entire video dedicated to this one topic, that video is more of a theory explaining why Jiraiya didn't come back within the confines of the Naruto universe. Because unfortunately, the true reality of Jiraiya not coming back as a reincarnation lies outside of the Naruto universe. You see, Obito and Kabuto have the conversation that they could bring back Shisui and Jiraiya. After all, they had Shisui's DNA in Danzo's hand when he took the Koto Matsukame out of his face and squished it, and that's all they would need, and they would just wipe that on a seal, and then bing bang boom, Shisui would be back. And then Kabuto stated that they had Jiraiya's blood on Nagato's chakra rods that they used to impale Jiraiya, and therefore we know that there was sufficient DNA to bring back both Jiraiya and Shisui. So why did neither of them end up coming back? Well, they're for different reasons, so we'll talk about Shisui in a second. Let's focus on Jiraiya. The reason in the anime is simply because Obito tells Kabuto not to bring them back to life. That's it. But this didn't sit right with a lot of fans of the show. People either wanted to see Jiraiya brought back or wouldn't understand why Obito wouldn't want 2 incredibly powerful fighters on his side. And because this didn't sit right with fans, a bunch of people asked Kishimoto, the mangaka of Naruto. And when posed with the question of why wasn't Jiraiya brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War as a reincarnation, Kishimoto stated that it would have complicated the storyline within the confines of the 4th Great Shinobi World War too much for Naruto. Basically, Kishimoto believed that if he brought back Jiraiya during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, that it would have been too much for him to write. See, Naruto was already trying to kill Madara, trying to shift Obito to the good side, his father was there, his mother lives inside of him. So Kishimoto thought adding Jiraiya into the situation would either cheapen the interaction that Naruto and Jiraiya would have, considering the fact that their relationship is one of the most important things in the entirety of Naruto, and more likely than not, their interaction would have just been boiled down to basically how Asuma was dealt with by Inoshika Cho, a battle between his sensei and his students that he's trying to let his students win but can't control his body. Kishimoto believed that that situation wouldn't have paid enough credence to Naruto and Jiraiya's relationship, and because he didn't know how to write it in a meaningful way in such a crammed arc, he kind of just cut it out. Is this lazy writing or self-awareness? I'll let you decide. I personally think there's a million ways they could have reincarnated Jiraiya and had him play into the story as a grander whole, and I think it actually would have been an incredible moment to see Minato, Jiraiya, and Naruto all together. But I'm not writing Naruto, and that's why I'm here yelling at a camera. On to the next person who was never reincarnated, Shisui. You see, unfortunately, unlike with Jiraiya, we've never had an opportunity as a fan base to ask Kishimoto why Shisui wasn't brought back to life. Kabuto had his DNA, Obito told him not to. That's the current explanation we have, within the confines of Naruto, of course. But when we take a step back and we look at Shisui as a greater character and what him being brought into the 4th Great Shinobi World War would have done, we can kind of make our own answer. You see, Shisui is a dual wielder of the Kodo Matsukame, a Mangekyo Sharingan ability that allows him to cast somebody under Genjutsu so complete it rewrites their entire personality and they don't even know what happened. Now, usually the problem with this jutsu is that after you use it, you're not able to use it in that certain eye that you used it in for 10 years. But if hypothetically Shisui was a reincarnation and they used the white Zetsu body to bring him back to life, that time could be cut down exponentially. I mean, Danzo was able to use Kodo Matsukame every 3 days because of the Hashirama cell arm he had. And a white Zetsu body is comprised entirely of Hashirama cells. Add on to that he would be an Edo Tensei body with infinite regeneration, and we could be talking once a day, maybe even less than that. So if hypothetically we brought back Shisui, who would come back with his Kodo Matsukame, mind you, because Madara, who died with no eyes, came back with his Sharingan, Shisui would be able to use Kodo Matsukame on basically whoever he wanted. If he was fighting for Kabuto, he could use it on Sasuke and Naruto. If he somehow got switched to the good guys, he could use it on Obito and Madara, or even maybe Kaguya. Probably not Kaguya and probably not Obito or Madara where they were 10 tails Jinchuriki, but like, you get the point. The prospect of having something as powerful as the Kodo Matsukame that could be used repetitively in the 4th Great Shinobi World War would make Shisui the only weapon anybody was trying to use. It would distract it from the greater scheme of the plot and also diluted the storyline. So while we don't technically have like an official reason, that's kind of the one that I choose to believe in. Speaking of questions that we don't have an official answer for, why didn't Sakura get a power-up? Specifically from Hagoromo. But actually not even specifically from Hagoromo, just why didn't she get a power-up in the war arc like the rest of Team 7? I mean, think about it. Kakashi got force ghosted a dual MS from Obito. Sasuke got handed a 6-tome Rinnegan for just being there. Naruto got the chakra of the Sage of Six Paths, while Sakura got what exactly? I mean, obviously she shows off her strength of 100 seal at the beginning of the war arc and the fact that she can use it in conjunction with her mitotic regeneration, and then obviously we see her and Tsunade summon 10% of Lady Katsuya. But that's no different from the power-ups that we saw from Sasuke and Naruto and Kakashi in the beginning of the war. So why didn't Sakura get a late stage power-up? Unfortunately, the answer to this one is a little bit less fun than the other ones. It's just sexism. There's no real official answer as to why Sakura didn't receive a power-up when everybody else on Team 7 did. But if you don't want the answer to be sexism, you could just say that Sakura is supposed to be the last bastion of hard work on Team 7. Sakura, for her entire career as a ninja, has been the symbol of hard work. She's been chasing after 2 literal reincarnations of gods and the strongest sensei in the entirety of Konoha. And through pretty much sheer hard work and nothing being handed to her, like with Naruto, Sasuke, and Kakashi, she's gotten to fight on pseudo their level. She's done this through increasing her chakra control, increasing her regeneration, her chakra reserves, making herself almost entirely resistant to Genjutsu, and a myriad of other very impressive things. Also, if you think about it, all of the power-ups that Sasuke, Naruto, and Kakashi received eventually were rescinded. Well, Naruto still has the Sage Six Paths chakra, but he no longer has Kurama, which is one of the things that was handed out to him. So it is a possibility, albeit an incredibly slim one, that Kishimoto wanted to make Sakura kind of unnerfable, since everything that she's gained in terms of power, she built herself, and therefore can't be taken from her. Building her up to play a more crucial role down the line, possibly? Or sexism, which, considering the way that the majority of women are written within the confines of Naruto, is the more likely answer. But it doesn't mean we can't explore more fun ones. Speaking of fun, why didn't Neji and Rock Lee show up more in Shippuden? Neji and Rock Lee felt as though they were key parts in part 1 of Naruto. We had Rock Lee's fight against Gaara, his recovery, his fight against Kimimaru. We had Neji being born a genius but into the side family where his father had to sacrifice his life for the main family's head, making Neji resent the next leader of the Hyuga clan, Hinata, his cousin. But Neji, a child genius born into a prestigious family, albeit the side branch, got the ideology that you can never raise above the station of your birth stuck into his head, and Naruto had to uppercut it out of him. And just like that, we had 2 characters that represented opposite ends of a spectrum, being born on third base in Neji and working your way there in Rock Lee. And within part 1 of Naruto, they probably had the most compelling stories. And yet, the only time they ever appeared in Shippuden was filler. So why is this? Why would Kishimoto sideline some of his most loved characters? Well, it's because they weren't supposed to make it to Shippuden. See, originally Kishimoto wanted Naruto to be significantly darker than it ended up being. And if you read the manga as opposed to watching the anime, you'll actually see this. Moments like Haku's death. In both the manga and the anime, Kakashi is responsible for killing Haku. I guess you could say Haku's responsible for killing Haku because he jumps in front of Kakashi. Regardless, in the manga, Kakashi punches all the way through Haku's chest, chest. So much so that you see his hand out the back of his chest with blood dripping on it. But within the anime, Kakashi's Chidori is what goes through Haku. And Kakashi is only seen resting his hand on Haku's chest. See, Kishimoto wanted the entirety of Naruto to look like this. Gory deaths left and right, killing off side characters to build up bad guys. And if I do say so myself, I think Naruto would be better off for this. However, what was unexpected was the traction that Naruto picked up almost immediately. Not even just in Japan, internationally. See, in the early 2000s, while Japan did enjoy gorier manga, like Berserk, Trigun, and Hellsing, killing off of side characters and over-excessive gore didn't sell well in international markets. So when Kishimoto posed the idea of having Kidomaru, the Sound Village 4 ninja who had the mouth arrows, who was basically a spider, killing Neji, his international editors shut the idea down, saying that killing off this character who was loved in international markets would affect manga sales. And the same thing was said to Kishimoto when he proposed Rock Lee dying in his fight against either Gaara or Kimimaru. However, because Rock Lee, just like with Neji, was so beloved in international markets, his editors shut the idea down. But the problem was Kishimoto, like any mangaka, storyboards substantially beyond where they are currently. And since Kishimoto was so far in the future, once Neji and Rock Lee were actually decided to survive by the editors, Kishimoto had already basically been writing a story that didn't have either of them. And this is why they play such insubstantial parts in the rest of Shippuden. If you ask me, I think it would have been substantially better to have both Neji and Rock Lee die in part 1, because if we're talking from a story standpoint, they pretty much did anyways. But since we're talking about Shippuden, that's where the majority of the questions that you guys are probably going to ask me come from. And that's where our next question comes from. Why didn't Deidara just spam C0, his ultimate final attack, when he was Edo Tensei? See, we all know that Deidara has a hand mouth on his chest. And if Deidara feeds explosive clay to this hand mouth, it basically makes him an atomic bomb. An atomic bomb capable of wiping entire villages off the map. The only problem is, it kills him. For all intents and purposes, it makes him a suicide bomber. However, on sheer scale, this is one of the most destructive attacks we've seen in all of Naruto. The only canon attacks, because obviously Fury exists in non-canon, that could even compare to the destructive capabilities of this attack would be Rinnegan abilities, like Heaven Concealed or Almighty Push. And those are rare. But when you consider the fact that all Edo Tensei bodies have infinite regeneration, Deidara could use this final attack multiple times. In fact, he could use it infinitely. We know this because Tobirama's been using Edo Tensei bodies to pull off multiplying explosive tags. That's the hardest jutsu to say in all of Naruto, where essentially he just makes Edo Tensei bodies out of paper bombs, and as they explode, they also regenerate into more paper bombs. So Deidara, after pulling off his C0 attack, would simply just come back together. However, Deidara is Deidara. What I mean by that is Deidara is obsessed with his art, the art of explosions. And since Deidara is obsessed with the art of explosions, specifically how fleeting they are, and by fleeting I mean that every explosion only lasts for a certain amount of time and every explosion is different, Deidara considered the C0 his final art. And so they actually address in both the manga and the anime, though it does happen rather quickly, Deidara doesn't want to cheapen his final art by using it over and over again, and therefore he wouldn't use C0 as a reincarnation. Now hypothetically, Deidara could have been forced to use C0, but the way that Kabuto uses Edo Tensei, he lets everybody he brings back retain their personality. He simply directs them in a general way, like kill Naruto. Now, if somebody like Orochimaru brought back Kabuto, it would be a different story, because Orochimaru doesn't bring back as many Edo Tensei bodies, but because he doesn't bring back a lot of people, he enacts greater control over those he brings back, basically entirely getting rid of their personality. And since Orochimaru could have gotten rid of Deidara's personality, and even Kabuto could have done this, they could have hypothetically forced Kabuto to enact C0 over and over and over again. But they didn't do that because, just like with Shisui, it would have been boring. Speaking of things that would have been boring in the war arc, why didn't anybody use Reaper Death Seal on either Kaguya or Madara? Well, it's an idea, and technically to a small degree it would have worked. Sort of. You see, Reaper Death Seal has rules, and like a lot of them, but some of those rules actually do make it incredibly powerful. Like the fact that the Shinigami can't be seen by the user until the Shinigami has a hold of the person it's being cast upon's soul. So as long as you've done the hand signs for Reaper Death Seal and you're about 10 meters away from somebody, you can snag their soul without them even really realizing. And by the time that the Shinigami has a grasp on their soul, it's pretty much too late. Because the second that the Shinigami reaches into your stomach and grabs your soul, you become frozen, and you can no longer weave chakra. That is to say, you can no longer use ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, anything really. The second that the Shinigami gets a hold of your soul, you're pretty much done for. The only problem is how done you are is highly dependent on who's casting Reaper Death Seal. See, because Reaper Death Seal is a tug of war, and whoever has more chakra wins. wins. Well, technically nobody wins in Reaper Death Seal, but I'll explain. If you have more chakra than somebody, then you can pull the entirety of their soul out of their body. However, if you're using Reaper Death Seal on somebody who has more chakra than you can only pull out as much of their soul as you have of their chakra. So if they have 100 chakra and you have 50, you can only pull out half of their soul. Now, since the soul technically coordinates the parts of the body, as long as you pull out the head, the torso, and the arms, once you pull that soul out, that person's probably gonna die. But the thing is, pulling out the head, the torso, and the arms isn't even a guarantee. You could possibly get the legs. You could be like Hiruzen and only get the arms. And the thing about Madara and Kaguya and even Obito is they had an insane amount of chakra, especially once they were the 10 Tails Jinchuriki. They had a level of chakra that was uncomparable to anyone outside of the confines of maybe Hashirama or Naruto. And when taken into consideration that Madara had Hashirama's cells and therefore probably accessed the Hashirama levels of chakra on top of his own levels of chakra, even Hashirama wouldn't compare to Madara. And therefore, while people like Hashirama and Naruto could have possibly used Reaper Death Seal against Kaguya or Madara, they probably wouldn't have been able to full kill them with it. And losing Naruto to a non-full kill is not a great idea. Also, on top of that, we're not even entirely sure if Otsutsuki's have souls. Hell, there's a couple of theories that the Shinigami that appears once you do Reaper Death Seal is actually an Otsutsuki. So even if hypothetically somebody had as much chakra as Kaguya, which nobody out there does, even amongst Otsutsuki, she probably has the most chakra. We don't know if that one legendary chakra leveled human would even actually be able to pull anything out of Kaguya. But while we're talking about the war arc and chakra expenditures, let's talk about Kakashi. See, we're gonna do a you know nothing about Kakashi at some point, which will address these questions in a much broader scope. But for the moment, let's ask the question, why didn't Kakashi go blind during the war arc? For that matter, why didn't Kakashi go blind, well, ever? Kakashi is seen using Kamui just so often, especially in the war, but he never goes blind in that eye. And yet, if you're only a Mangekyo Sharingan holder and not an internal Mangekyo Sharingan holder, don't you go blind if you use your abilities too much? Well, here's the thing. Kakashi was going blind. In fact, he himself states before he uses Kamui on Madara's true secret orb little ball there, that his vision's going blurry and he can barely see. But here's the thing, Itachi used both of his Mangekyo Sharingan for years with the Akatsuki. And he was using things like Susanoo, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and he didn't go blind until basically his death, because in his fight against Sasuke, he could actually barely see. So Kakashi was using a relatively less taxing jutsu, though at a high rate. But during the war, he was losing his sight before Madara took his eye. And we don't know whether or not Madara received a somewhat blind eye, but at that moment Madara was also a 10 Tails Jinchuriki and had Hashirama's cells, which stopped Obito from going blind for years. So whether or not Madara got a blinded eye doesn't really change anything because Hashirama's cells would fix it immediately. The real question is, why didn't Kakashi run out of chakra? Kakashi in part 1 of Naruto could only use his Sharingan and Chidori a handful of times, and then he would be tapped from the chakra expenditure. This is why he kept his Sharingan covered with his headband, because when the Sharingan wasn't covered, it was a big tap on his chakra. But in the war arc, he has his Sharingan uncovered for like days. So what changed? Did Kakashi get some crazy chakra power up from Hagoromo as well? No. There's a couple of theories that talk about why Kakashi got such a power up in Shippuden. People state that Kakashi was depressed about losing so many people in his life and therefore never had access to his true potential. And through the love of Team 7 and wanting to raise Naruto and Sakura and Sasuke to be upstanding Jonin, Kakashi found himself and therefore his true potential. And while this definitely plays a role into it because Kakashi is a prime example of somebody going through grief and finding acceptance, at the same time, in the beginning of Shippuden, I believe it's episode 5, we see Kakashi training. See, during the time skip, Kakashi basically had nothing to do. All 3 of his students were with their 3 respective legendary Sannin. And so over the course of those 3 years, Kakashi trained. And we get tapped into this. We see Kakashi climbing up a rock wall with one hand. And as Kakashi struggles to get to the top of this rock wall, we see him do something. He opens the first gate, the Gate of Life, showing us that Kakashi accidentally tapped into the 8 gates. And the Gate of Life gives you access to your full potential of chakra. It increases your abilities with ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu. It also increases your speed, reactivity, and agility. So slowly but surely, as Kakashi accepted the fact that he could use his Mangekyo Sharingan without feeling guilt about Rin, and the fact that he tapped into the 8 gates, and the fact that he trained for 3 years during the time skip, leads us to a much more powerful version of Kakashi in Shippuden than we saw in part 1. But like I said, we'll dive much deeper into that once we finally do a you know nothing about Kakashi. And the last question we have for the day is one that I really enjoy talking about. Why didn't Itachi get revenge for Shisui? See, we learned from the Itachi light novels that Itachi was fully aware that it was Danzo who killed Shisui. Well, technically Itachi was the one who killed Shisui, but Danzo heavily poisoned Shisui to the point where he was gonna die anyways. So why didn't Itachi get revenge against those who killed his best friend? Well, the reason that Itachi never attacks Danzo is because Danzo holds the puppet strings for the root. And Itachi was under the impression that if he killed Danzo, that it would get blamed on the Uchihas and the Uchihas would get wiped out in a coup, which would put Sasuke in danger. And since technically the Uchiha massacre was a deal made between Danzo and Itachi, Danzo was supposed to be in charge of somewhat protecting Sasuke, even though those responsibilities kind of got handed over to Hiruzen after he found out what Danzo made Itachi do. It's not like Danzo or Hiruzen did a good job. However, Itachi did exact revenge. See, technically Danzo wasn't the person who poisoned Shisui. He was the person who pulled out one of his eyes, but he wasn't the person who poisoned him. See, the person who poisoned him was a man by the name of Yoji Aburame, one of Danzo's personal guards from the root, a member of the Aburame clan, aka Shino's clan, that was able to use a bug about the size of a mosquito that could deliver a payload of paralytic toxins. This was technically the person that killed Shisui, and therefore after the Uchiha massacre, Itachi lures Yoji Aburame out of Konoha, because Itachi knew that Danzo would put Yoji Aburame on observing him duty. After luring him out of Konoha, Itachi uses Tsukiyomi on the bugs that live inside of Yoji's body, rendering him immobile. And it was at that point that he used Amaterasu for the first time in his life, as he launched it onto the immobile Yoji Aburame and watched him burn to death. As to why Itachi never launched revenge against Danzo, well, that's because Danzo lived in fear of Itachi, and that's where Itachi wanted him. You see, the reason Itachi and Kisame came back to Konoha was actually because Itachi wanted to keep an eye on Danzo. He wanted to remind Danzo that he was very much alive and very present, in case Danzo ever got the idea of laying a hand on Sasuke. And because Danzo was a higher up in Konoha at the moment, having somebody in Konoha who was at a high status that was afraid of Itachi coming back to kill him was beneficial to Itachi and making sure Sasuke was safe. And that's it, the definitive answer to the most common questions that I get. Did I answer your guys' questions? Do you have more questions? If you do, tell me in the comments below. And while you're down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, I wanted Itachi to kill Danzo. I think it would have been warranted. I think it would have been cool. I don't think it would have caused anything bad, but I had to keep him around for Sasuke to kill.